stress in working families and lower-income people. Second point, I will tell you something that no other candidate for president will tell you. And that is, given the balance of power in America, given the fact that Wall Street and corporate America and large campaign donors have so much influence over the political and legislative process, no presidents, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, will successfully address the real problems facing our country unless there is a political revolution. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean in English? What it means is if you think somebody else is going to do it for you, including a good president, you're wrong. Because the opposition is so strong, they won't let it happen unless tens of millions of people demand that it happen. You understand what I'm saying? If you think somebody else is going to do it for you, you're wrong. We've got to do this together. So this campaign is not just about electing Bernie Sanders. I would very much appreciate your vote and your help to make that happen. But that's not enough. I need your help during the campaign, and I will need your help the day after the campaign. All right, so let's talk about the real issues facing America that get too little discussion in this country. And Dr. West mentioned some of them, but let me touch on them. First of all, you have an issue which is, in my view, a moral issue. It is certainly an economic issue, and it is obviously a political issue. And that is the fact that in the United States of America, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse today in America than at any time since 1928. What does that mean? Here's what it means. It means that in America today, the top 1/10 of 1%, I'm not talking about 1%, I'm talking about 1/10 of 1%, own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Anybody here think that's moral or right? In America today, despite a huge increase in technology and productivity, 58% of all new income created, you know where it's going? It's going to the top 1%. Anyone think that makes sense? Today in America, you have one family, the Walton family, owns Walmart. One family in America owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. Anyone think that's fair? Now, my Republican colleagues get very nervous when we talk about distribution of wealth. They get very nervous. So let me tell you something. In the last 30 years in America, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth. What's the problem? It's gone in the wrong direction. We have seen trillions of dollars go from the pockets of working families, trillions of dollars, into the bank accounts of the top 1/10 of 1%. And brothers and sisters, you and I together are going to change the flow of that revenue. Not going to go from the middle class to the top 1/10. It's going to go from the top 1/10 down into the pockets and the needs of working families in this country. So this campaign is sending a very strong message to the billionaire class. And that message is, you cannot have it all. You are not going to get more tax breaks when children in America go hungry. You are not going to continue sending our jobs to China and other low-wage nations when millions of people in this country are in desperate need of work. You're not going to pay your CEOs of large corporations huge compensation packages and then cut the wages and health care and retirement programs of the people who work for you. That is not going to happen anymore. And when we talk about what's going on in our economy, it is important to understand that, yes, thank God, the economy today is a lot better than it was when George W. Bush left office. When Bush left office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Today, we're growing 150, 200,000 jobs a month. And that's a step forward. But I want everybody here to fully understand that for the last 40 years, the middle class of this country has been disappearing. If you are a male worker in the middle of the economy, you are making $700 less in inflation-adjusted dollars than you made 42 years ago. If you are a woman working, you're making $1,500 less than you made in 2007 in inflation-adjusted income. So, brothers and sisters, the first issue is we need an economy that works for working families, not just a handful of billionaires. And Dr. West mentioned this, but let me elaborate on this point. Every month, the United States government comes out with a statistic on unemployment, very important issue. Last number that they came out with was that unemployment in America, official unemployment, was 5.1%. That is one statistic. There's another statistic. And that statistic says that if you look at unemployment in the sense of people who have no jobs, people who have given up looking for jobs, people who are looking by the millions, working part-time when they want to work full-time, real unemployment is over 10%. Second point, and this is an issue I am trying to generate discussion on, not having a whole lot of luck, but I want to tell it to you. It's an enormously important issue. 2 months ago, I asked a think tank called the Economic Policy Institute in D.C. to do a study for me. And here's what the study entailed. I wanted them to tell me what real youth unemployment in this country was, because we don't talk about it. Youth unemployment. And here's what they discovered. If you're talking about high school graduates, not dropouts, high school graduates between 17 and 20 who are unemployed or underemployed, if the kids are white, the number is 33%. If the kids are Hispanic, number is 36%. If the kids are African American, youth unemployment is 51%. In other words, these are high school graduates. We are turning our backs on an entire generation of young people who want to get out into the world. They want to make some money. They want careers. They want to stand up on their own 2 feet, want to get out of their parents' homes. They want to be independent. And what we're saying to millions of these young people, black and white and Hispanic, is sorry, there are no jobs available for you. you're not going to get any income. You're not going to begin to go out in the world and start a career. Now, everybody in this room knows, or should know, another very tragic fact. The United States of America has more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China. Now think about it. China, 3 times our size, communist, authoritarian country. They don't tolerate dissent all that well. We have more people in jail than China does. And if anybody in this room thinks there is not a direct connection between outrageously high youth unemployment and the fact that we have so many people in jail, you would be terribly mistaken. Now, I want to tell you another fact. You'll forgive me, but I'm going to bore you with facts. I'm not great at jokes. All right. So let's get some truth out there. Now, I want you all to listen to this because it is a tragedy. I want you to hear it. In 1979, 15% of African American male high school dropouts ended up in jail. 15%. That's terrible. Today, the last study we have seen in 2009, listen to this. 69% of male African American high school dropouts ended up in jail. Now, it seems to me, given that reality, that tragic reality, that it makes a lot more sense for us to invest in jobs and education rather than jails and incarceration. This is the United States of America. We should not be having more people in jail than any other country. We should be having the best educated population in the entire world. And when we talk about the economy, and we ask why it is in my state of Vermont or your state of South Carolina, why it is that people are working 2 or 3 jobs, 50 or 60 hours a week, trying to get some income to take care of their families or provide some health care. There is a reason for that. And that reason is that wages in America are just too damn low. Now, you can do the arithmetic as well as I can, but a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour just doesn't cut it. And that is why we have to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour over the next few years. It is not a radical idea to say that if somebody works 40 hours a week, that that person should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about the needs of working families, another point that I want to make. The United States of America today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid medical and family leave. So what happens is if a lower-income woman has a baby, what happens? She is separated from that baby after a week or two because she's got to go back to work in order to provide for her families. That is not a family value, and that's why I believe every family in America is entitled to 12 weeks paid family leave. And when we talk about an economy where real unemployment is 10%, youth unemployment is 30, 40, 50%, we need a massive federal jobs program to put millions of people back to work at decent wages. And the fastest way to do that is to understand that our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our rail system, our airports, our water systems are collapsing. We can create up to 13 million decent-paying jobs with $1 trillion investment in infrastructure, and I intend to make that investment. And if you want to know why the rich get richer and everybody else gets poorer, it's important to look at the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior on Wall Street. Everybody in this room knows that this country was plunged into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression because of what the people on Wall Street did. And now you'll be surprised to know that 3 out of the 4 largest banks today are larger now than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. So it seems to me, brothers and sisters, that if a bank is too big to fail, it's too big to exist, we're going to break them up. Now, I want to touch on another issue which impacts every other issue. If you are concerned about jobs, raising the minimum wage, women's rights, civil rights, if you're concerned about any issue, you have got to be concerned about the disastrous shape of campaign finance in America. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean? Let's take a hard look at what democracy is about. What democracy is supposed to be about, as people in this room, many people in this room know, especially well. What does it mean? It means one person, one vote. I've got a vote, you have a vote. But what has happened since this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision is that the Supreme Court said to the wealthiest people in this country, you already own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government. That's what they said, and that is what people are doing right now. Who thinks that a democracy is about billionaires spending hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the rich and the powerful? That's not democracy. We have today one family, the Koch brothers, second wealthiest family in America. They are going to spend $900 million on this campaign. $900 million to elect Republicans who want to give more tax breaks to the rich and cut programs for working families. That $900 million is more money than either the Democratic or Republican Party will spend. When you have one family spending more money than either of the two major political parties, brothers and sisters, that is not called democracy. That is called oligarchy, and we must not allow that to take place. What democracy is about is saying, you don't like what I say, you want to vote against me. That's called democracy. That's great. But you don't have the right to buy elections just because you're a billionaire. That's wrong. And you know what else? I want the young people who are seated here today, the young people right here in Benedict College and others all over this country, regardless of their political views. You want to get involved in the political process. You want to run for office? I think you should be able to run for office without having to beg millionaires for campaign funds. And that is why I believe in public funding of elections. And let me tell you something else I believe in. Last month, I was in an event with Martin Luther King III. And that event talked about the great struggle that brought about the historic Voting Rights Act of 50 years ago, and you all know about that. Finally, the United States Congress and President Johnson said, everybody in this country, regardless of the color of their skin, will have the right to vote. An historic day in America. But as you know, that important piece of legislation has been significantly gutted by the Supreme Court decision of 2 years ago. And let me just say this, as somebody who has competed in many elections in my own state of Vermont. I regard it as a disgrace that literally hours after that decision, you had Republican governors and public officials figuring out ways as to how they could suppress the vote, how they could make it harder for poor people or old people or people of color to vote. And what I believe is if you want to run for office, you got to have the guts to run for office based on your ideas and not figure out ways to make it harder for people who will vote against you to participate in the political process. That's called political cowardice. And as president, I will do everything that I can to make voting in this country as simple as possible. You're 18 years of age, you're registered to vote. Let's increase voter turnout. And when we talk about some of the major issues facing this country, all of you know that we live in a highly competitive global economy, and we need the best educated workforce in the world in order to survive. It is beyond comprehension that there are hundreds of thousands of bright young people today who have done well in high school, who have the ability and the qualifications to go to college, but they can't go to college for one reason. And that reason is their families lack the money. Now, I think that is crazy. I think it is unfair to those young people. I think it is unfair to the future of our country, which need the best and the brightest people that we can have and make sure they get the best education they can. And that is why we're working on a number of important issues. First of all, if elected president, I will fight to make every public college and university tuition-free. In addition to that, I pledge to you we will not forget about the enormously important role historic black colleges and universities play in this country. And I want to congratulate Benedict College and many of the other historic black colleges and universities for understanding that it is vitally important for young people, regardless of their income, to get a college education. Thank you for opening the doors to our young people in this country. And when we talk about important issues facing our country, we have got to understand that as adults, we have a moral responsibility to make certain that we leave this planet healthy and habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. And I want everybody here to know, because I sit on both the Environmental Committee and the Energy Committee in the U.S. Senate, and I've talked to a lot of scientists over the years. The debate is over within the scientific community. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change today is already causing devastating problems in our country and all over the world. And in my view, if we are concerned about our kids and our grandchildren, we have got to do everything that we can to lead the effort, work with China, Russia, India, and other countries in transforming this planet's energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, one of the things I'm trying to do in this campaign is to mention and educate the American people about what goes on in other countries, wealthy countries around the world, in terms of programs that benefit ordinary folks. I hope that everybody in this room today understands that the United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. I live in Burlington, Vermont. We are 100 miles away from the Canadian border. In Canada, a country in many ways very similar to the United States, all of their people, the babies, the poor, the old, all of their people have health care as a right. That's true in the United Kingdom, in France, in Germany, in every other major country on earth. And if I have anything to say about it, that's going to be true in America as well. Health care in a civilized, democratic society is a right of all people, not a privilege. And in my view, we've got to move toward a Medicare for all, single-payer program. I am right now the ranking member on the Budget Committee. And what that means, I am the leader of the Democratic opposition. We are in the minority now in the Senate. We hope to change that. But we are in the minority right now. Republicans control. And I want to say a few words about the Republican budget because the media did a terrible, terrible job in not reporting it. Surprise, surprise. Here's what was in the Republican budget. I know something about it because I was involved. At a time when 35 million Americans today have no health insurance, and many of you are underinsured, yeah? Large deductibles and copayments? Okay. The Republican response to that problem was to throw 27 million people off of health insurance by ending the Affordable Care Act and making massive cuts in Medicaid. And when you ask them, as I did, hey, tell me, what happens when you throw 27 million people off of health insurance? How many of those people are going to die? How many of those people are going to become much sicker than they otherwise would have become? They have no response. None. At a time when everybody in this room understands that middle-class and working-class families are finding it harder and harder to send their kids to college, when we understand how important the Pell Grant program is for historic black colleges and universities and for kids all across this country, Republican budget over a 10-year period cut Pell Grants by $90 billion. At a time when millions of working families are not earning enough money to adequately feed their families, many of them end up going to emergency food shelves, Republican budget cut tens of billions of dollars in nutrition programs, including programs for low-income moms and their babies. And then, to add insult to injury, the Republican budget gave over $250 billion in tax breaks to the wealthiest 0.2%. And I say to my Republican colleagues, those are not the needs of the American people. Those are not the priorities of the American people, and you're not going to get away with that. Let me say a word about an issue also of enormous consequence. And that is that, in my view, we have made significant gains in this country in the last many decades because of the struggles of millions of African Americans and their white allies in the struggle for racial justice. 30 years ago, if we were sitting in this room and somebody jumped up and said, you know, I think maybe America has come so far in terms of overcoming its historic racism that maybe by the year 2008 we're going to elect an African American as President of the United States and re-elect them 4 years later, very few people in this room 30 years ago would have thought that that was possible. But it happened, and we should be proud of that progress. And the important point here is not whether you like Barack Obama or you don't like Barack Obama. The important point is that in America we are beginning to vote for people based on their ideas and not the color of their skin. And that's a step forward. But when we talk about making the United States the kind of nation we want to become, we all understand that tragically racism remains alive today, and our goal together must be to end all forms of institutional racism and make major reforms in our criminal justice system. When I talk about racism, I am not just talking about the incredible sickness of a man who walked into a Bible study class in Charleston, prayed with people in the room, and then took out a gun and killed 9 of them in cold blood. And I'm not just talking about the hundreds of groups in this country hate groups, whose sole reason for existence, if you can believe it, and it's hard to imagine, groups whose sole reason for existence is based on hatred. Hatred of African Americans, hatred of immigrants, hatred of gays, hatred of Jews, hatred of Catholics. Imagine an organization whose sole reason in life is not to love their fellow brothers and sisters, but to hate those people who are different than them. But I'm not even talking about those groups. I am talking about Sandra Bland and Michael Brown and Rekia Boyd and Eric Gardner and Walter Scott and Freddie Gray and many others. And too many others who died at the hands of police officers or in police custody. Now, two points to be made here. First, if anybody thinks that this phenomenon of people being killed unarmed people being killed while in police custody is something new, you are very, very mistaken. It has gone on for a very long time, but the only difference is that way back when, we didn't have these things. And now you're seeing it on TV. And let me also say, and I speak as a former mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont, and spent a lot of time working with our police department. In my view, the vast majority of police officers in this country are honest, they are hardworking, and they're trying to do a very difficult job. Many of them are underpaid, many of them are undertrained, and many of them work under incredible schedules that make their lives very difficult. But let me also say this, that like any other public official, if a police officer breaks the law, that police officer must be held accountable. Now, when you have, as we do, more people in jail than any other country on earth, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that our criminal justice system is deeply broken. So I can't go into all of what I believe we have to do, but let me touch on some of the reforms that we need. First, I do not want to see local police departments heavily militarized and look like they're invading armies. A good police department, and there are many of them, are part of the community, which is why I believe in the concept of community policing. Police officers in the community, part of the community, trusted by people in the community. Furthermore, we need police departments in this country who look like the people they are serving. We need new rules regarding the allowable use of force and lethal force. A good police officer, and I have personally seen this more than once, walks into a volatile situation, people are fighting, people are screaming, and a good police officer knows how to diffuse that situation without using force. We need to rethink the war on drugs. I find it remarkable that many young people have a criminal record for smoking marijuana, but not one major Wall Street executive has been prosecuted for illegal behavior. We need to end the absurdity of private corporations making profits by running and building prisons. And we've just introduced legislation to do just that. Companies should not be profiting from the incarceration of fellow Americans. We need to take a hard look at minimum sentencing procedures. Too many nonviolent folks have ended up in jail with their lives destroyed. We need to invest in drug courts and medical and mental health intervention. Substance abuse is a disease, not a crime, and we've got to treat it as a disease. And I'll tell you something else. We need to absolutely rethink how we treat people in prison so that there is a path for them out of prison back into society. Now you tell me, some guy serves 5 years in jail, comes out of jail with no education, with no job, with no money, with no housing. Are we really shocked that he goes back into the old environment that got him into jail in the first place? We're not shocked, and that's why we have a horrendously high rate of recidivism. People who come in jail, get out, they go back into jail. And we got to focus on that issue. And when we talk about creating the country we want to create, we also have to understand that today in America, we have 11 million undocumented people. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, a month or so ago. Talked to half a dozen young Hispanic kids, tears rolling out of their eyes because they were fearful that they or their parents would be deported. We need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. We live, as everybody knows, and you can't avoid it when you turn on the TV, in a very difficult, complicated, and crazy world. Why people are doing the things to each other that they do all over the world, the barbarity that we are seeing, makes our stomachs turn, and it is hard to understand how people are killing innocent people, enslaving girls into sexual slavery, all of these disgusting things that are almost unimaginable. And anyone who tells you that they have a magical solution to foreign policy and how we create a more peaceful and civilized world is kidding you. Nobody has any magical answers. But let me just say this. I voted against the war in Iraq. I listened. I listened carefully because there's no vote that a member of Congress makes that is more important than whether or not we're going to send our kids off to war and get killed. I listened carefully. And I heard what President Bush had to say, what Vice President Cheney had to say. I heard what the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, had to say. I heard what they all had to say. And I didn't believe it. And now we have another major international issue in front of us, and that is the following. I believe, and I think most of you believe, that it is imperative that Iran not get a nuclear weapon. If they got a nuclear weapon, completely destabilize that region. Very bad idea. But I believe and agree with President Obama that we have got to do everything that we can to achieve the goal of Iran not getting a nuclear weapon without going to war. I am the senator from a small state, beautiful, great state of Vermont, and I have, over the years, gone to too many funerals of wonderful young people who never came home from Afghanistan and Iraq. I will never forget those funerals as long as I live. We should not be burying 20-year-old kids. I believe that a great nation, a nation with the most powerful military in the world, should do everything that it can to resolve international conflict without having to go to war. Now, sometimes you can't do it. I understand that. And that's why we have a military. But I got to tell you, I am not impressed by many of my Republican colleagues coming to the floor of the Senate in the kind of matter-of-fact way talk about going to war with Iran. It will not be their kids who will be dying in that war.
That's right.
So maybe big, loud talk about how tough we are, maybe that gets you votes. But I don't believe in it, and I believe that a great nation works as hard as we can to negotiate, to try to bring peace to this world in any way that we can. Now let me close by saying this. I hope very much that all of you understand that we are living not in some poor developing country. We are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And the important point is we must, as a people, think big, not small. Big, not small. So when I say to you that we can live in a nation in which every man, woman, and child has health care as a right, that's not utopian, that's not pie in the sky. We can do it because almost every other major nation is doing it. We can do it, and we should do it. And when I tell you that we can live in a nation, not a nation which has the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country, but the lowest rate, we can do that too. We can live in a nation where when a working mom and a working dad go off to work, they know that their kids are in the best quality child care or pre-K system in the world. We can do that. It is not utopian to say that every person in this country, regardless of their income, should be able to get all of the education that they need. We can do that. That already exists in other countries. This is not some kind of crazy left-wing idea. It exists. We can do it. We can live in a nation where every senior citizen can live out their retirement years in dignity and security. My Republican colleagues want us to cut Social Security. Ain't gonna happen. We're going to expand Social Security benefits. We can live in a nation where every veteran, the men and women who have put their lives on the line to defend this country, get the health care and the other benefits they need. We are not going to balance the budget on the backs of veterans or the elderly or the children or the sick or the poor. What we are going to do is tell the richest people in this country who have become phenomenally richer, they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. We can, brothers and sisters, live in a country where every American, no matter their race, their religion, their disability, or their sexual orientation, realizes the full promise of equality that is our birthright as Americans. That is the nation that I believe we can become. And if we stand together and not allow them to divide us up by the color of our skin, or whether we're a man or a woman, or whether we're gay or straight, or whether we were born in this country or born someplace else, if we stand together, that is the nation we can create and the nation we must create. Thank you very much.